Hi, everybody. This is a note to orient you to theory reading, literary criticism reading, cultural criticism reading, and your theory notes assignment. So, we're going to be reading a series of articles that people write as part of public intellectual life. And some of these are very famous ones, famous at least in English departments. You might not have heard of any of them, that have been around for a long time. Some are newer. I like to combine the old and the new so that we get a sense of the history of literary criticism and where it's going, because you are a part of the future. And so our first set of articles helps us to look at some contentious issues in how we're talking about literature today. As it mentions here, what is literature? Why do we read what we read? How has people's access to fiction and reading changed over time, and why? And so, look, I'm making the Theory Notes video right now. How meta is that? So what we're going to be looking at is an older article, very old, before any of our time, Walter Benjamin's 1936 article, The Work of Art in the Age of Its Mechanical Reproducibility, which is also referred to as the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. And he was a very famous intellectual in Europe in the 1930s, and saw kind of the growth of the modern era, as well as some challenging political times in Nazi Germany, and also seeing kind of the advantages and disadvantages of populism. And so there's a video from YouTube that kind of is about this essay and helps familiarize you with it so that when you're reading it, it seems less unfamiliar. And then you'll read the actual article. Then there's an anthology that's totally free and has a bunch of great stuff in it by Harvard University Press, that's just come out in 2020. They made it available, I think, following the different race riots that we've had this summer. So take stuff and read it. Free book that was probably like $50 new, so woohoo. This article from, I think, 2020 by Anthony Abraham Jack, called The Privileged Poor, How Elite Colleges Are Failing Disadvantaged Students. It's a great article. It's a personal memoir. It kind of helps us look at how structures can replicate inequalities from a personal level. And then kind of tying these two sets of issues together, we have digital culture now, we have digital humanities now, and we think that means that information will be everywhere and grow everywhere, but at the same time, it costs money to digitize things, and some writers get preferential treatment in terms of where money is allocated, and newer writers, some minority writers, are not getting that same level of funding. So we can kind of see how technology has potential, but technology also assimilates itself into the same difficult infrastructures that already existed. So that's a little overview of what that unit is doing for us. So it's okay if you don't get all of it 100%. Like, the whole point is that with theory, and I'm going to show you this now, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's, you grow and you learn. You might disagree with it, you might agree with it. Theory is about challenging your mind to develop rigor and flexibility, and then you can take that into your interpretations and understanding of culture and literature. So that's why I have this theory essay, reading practice, and notes and guidelines. So this is your guideline for your theory notes assignment that you will have. And we don't read critical theory the way we read other kinds of writing. Its main argument or its thesis might be kind of hard to figure out at first. There's no plot. It's not like you're following, like what's happening to Hamlet now. Sometimes there's no primary text at all that it's addressing, like a novel or play. If you've written a research paper in an English class before, people often go into JSTOR or Project Muse or wherever, or Google Scholar, and they type in the name of whatever book they're writing about, and then whatever comes up is the thing that you write about. Well, theory is often going to be like over on some other planet talking about Alfred Hitchcock, but you might have something really cool in your Quentin Tarantino paper that relates to that, and you won't find it unless you kind of go broad. So we're going to do some of that. We're going to stretch our minds. Sometimes the person writing is making references you don't completely understand. That happens to me too. It's okay. I go to my annual conference. Let's see, I go to a scholarly panel with 4 people giving talks. Maybe I've read 3 of the books that they're talking about, and the other one's totally new. But if what they have to say is interesting, that can help me grow. So yeah, everything's fine. It's okay. Confusion is normal. You will not be graded on whether you're confused or not. And honestly, sometimes wallowing in complexity yields great things. Theory disorients us when we read it, but it also reorients our perspectives. Writers are always leading our attention somewhere. We're used to this in fiction. In theory, you're being led somewhere unfamiliar. You have articles about culture, about ideas. And then the theorist might show you something new that may be confusing. You're like, wait, I know these words, but why are they arranged this way? That's okay too. Just kind of give yourself some patience, give yourself some grace. The writer is setting up a kind of frame through which they are seeing the world anew and helping you look at the world in their way. Sometimes the writer will have things in common with you. Often people like, let's say, theories about gender. Everybody grows up with a, feeling related to gender, whether or not it's an accurate one for you or not. It's one of those cultural markers that are applied to people. If you're reading about gender, sometimes it's easier to understand that than some other kinds of theory. Same thing with, race, politics, sexual orientation, etc. And the more distant you are from the kind of frame that is being represented, the harder it can be to understand it. But try to take in what you can. See if you can see what this writer is seeing. And of course, you obviously go back to your own life, world, mind after it, after you're done reading. And you'll want to write down your questions too. And so when you're done reading, so this is the assignment part, you're going to do an entry for each essay in your notes journal. They don't have to be long, like a paragraph is fine. And if you're struggling on a couple things and all you can do is write the journal entry, that's okay. Try to really get into some of them, though. That will help your writing in longer assignments. So each theory note will have writer, article title, whatever you think might be the main ideas. Maybe you're not getting it. That's okay. A book, movie, or TV show that this essay made you think of, or song, whatever kinds of media you consume. We write about literature. Learning to connect abstract stuff to concrete stuff is great. Important words and terms, what seems to keep coming up, what the strongest point you read in it was. And this is according to you. This doesn't have to be what Dr. Miller thinks. Like, I know what I think. I like what you think. The weakest point, like if there's anything you read and you're like, that's not how it works. Any memorable quotes that kind of pop up as you're writing essays, you can use these quotes to build outward. And any questions you have. So we're reading theory more at the beginning of the class, and then we're going to be reading literature later and other kinds of things. So when it says theory notes and notes journal on your syllabus, they're both the same document. You're just going to be uploading various Word documents to a file. The notes journal will have specific questions to guide you instead of this checklist, which the checklist is guidance in its own way. So post your journals periodically. I'm going to mark them as completed at the end of each month throughout the semester. So if we're on Slack talking about an essay, I might say, well, what did you think about Walter Benjamin and what he thinks about this? And, since people have probably read it, in the next week or so, they'll be able to talk about it. So post them at the end of the month. You'll probably have notes from multiple modules at the end of each month. Here we are. I'll give you, at the end of this is optional, but it might help you, a little bit of information about how you can kind of read the beginning of a theory essay. So this is the hardest one that you're reading is going to be the Benjamin, because it's older and it'll feel a little bit more distant to you. So we have the true is what he can, the false is what he wants. So this idea of authenticity is automatically being brought up in this epigraph to the essay. So he begins by talking about Marx. So if you were to think, is this Marxism? It's certainly talking about Marx, but right now we're going to focus on what the ideas are, and what you can get with them regardless of whether that is connected to Marxism or not. So when Marx undertook his analysis of the capitalist mode of production, that mode was in its infancy. Marx adopted an approach which gave his investigations prognostic value. Going back to the basic conditions of capitalist production, he presented them in a way which showed what could be expected of capitalism in the future. So what could be expected, it emerged, was not only an increasingly harsh exploitation of the proletariat or the workers, but ultimately the creation of conditions which would make it possible for capitalism to abolish itself. All right, so that's a lot. We're going to just start with that and break it down. You don't have to do this for every single word of every essay that you read, but it's interesting. He's talking about Marx as someone who's known for writing about money, economy, and society, and, famous book about capital. But Benjamin is right that was in its infancy when he was writing about it. So, he's writing about this thing as it's starting to really produce in the industrial age. Obviously, people were writing about money before this. You have Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, 18th century, all that stuff. So Marx is trying to present a future, and predict a future based on the phenomena that he observed. And the sort of hook that Benjamin gets to at the end of this paragraph is so is he noticing that, capitalism can potentially be self-destructive? And so that's, if that's what you take away from this first paragraph, okay. I mean, that's interesting. It's an interesting idea. You don't have to even agree with any of it to have a conversation about, well, how does capitalism sustain itself and how does it work against itself? Is competition good? Is competition bad? Do monopolies end up creating a lot of corruption? So you can talk about this in ways that connect to our society and the kinds of things we read and the things we observe in the news. If you scroll down a little bit, to get to art, theses defining the developmental tendencies of art can contribute to the political struggle in ways that it would be a mistake to underestimate. So he's talking about how art is political. So as you read this, try to kind of think of the implications of his ideas as you go. Good luck. We'll talk soon. Thank you.